Welcome to The Whole View. I'm Stacy Toth of Real Everything. I'm here each week to dive deeper into how we can find happiness and health inside and out through self-love, body positivity, and discovering new ways to be our best selves. Before we get started, a reminder this podcast is for general educational purposes and is not intended to diagnose, advise, or treat physical or mental illness. And while Jeffrey is a licensed life coach in California, they're not yours. So we always recommend that you see a licensed professional accordingly. That said, I want to welcome back our first guest to the show's new format, Jeffrey Marsh. Hi, Jeff.
Hello there. Hi. I'm so glad to be the first. Trailblazing. It's what I love.
I couldn't have asked for anything better. And listeners, if you didn't get the opportunity to listen to those, we'll put a link in the show notes for you. But I want to share a little bit about Jeffrey. They joined originally to discuss how problematic perfectionism can be. Their
Mm.
first book, How to Be You, was an introduction to that. And I discovered Jeffrey when Kiddo first came to us. So you are a fantastic, compassionate educator, Jeffrey. And we had a coaching call that truly opened a door for me to change my life and understanding perfectionism not being a good thing. And I realized
We could just stop there.
it really was a mind-blowing thing for me to realize that was not ideal. Not that's a
Maybe that's not the whole
maladaptive
point of my life. I don't know.
exactly.
Maybe.
Maladaptive coping skill, not something trying to achieve. Yes. So
Yeah, something.
I realized then that your message was something everyone could learn from, not just LGBTQ folk, which is how I
Mm,
originally came to you.
mm.
And it is Pride. So we are celebrating that. But there is something for everyone in the work that you do, which is why your TikToks and compassionate short form videos have over 1 billion with a B views. They are also a best-selling author, TikTok and Instagram star, non-binary activist, LGBTQ keynote speaker,
I'm
and the
busy.
first all the things, yes. And the first non-binary public speaker to appear on national television, being interviewed on Newsmax in 2016. Again, trailblazing.
Ugh.
And the first celebrity activist to use they them pronouns. Your first book, How to Be You, was a #1 bestseller and topped Oprah's gratitude meter. I didn't even know that was a thing. I gotta check it out.
Oh,
And
yeah.
named Excellent Book of the Year by TED Ed. You also have a viral TEDx. And all of, your journey was chronicled in How to Be You. And we talked a lot about that in prior shows, including your experience as a Zen monk and all the things that you brought to those studies for over 20 years.
Mm.
But now you're back with your second book, Take Your Own Advice, already a #1 Amazon bestseller and named Apple Books Best Book of the Month. And I'm excited to dive into the lessons that you're sharing with us in Take Your Own Advice, Learn to Trust Your Inner Voice, and Start Helping Yourself. So I want to give listeners a little intro before I turn it over to you.
Please.
So this book is for those who are oh, I'm gonna start over. Sorry, Matt. This book is for those who
Don't
are
apologize to Matt. Leave it in, Matt. We do not. It's your job to edit. It's our job to be stars. We're doing. You'll
okay.
take what we can
I'm
give
stumbled.
you.
Already making me happy. Okay. For those who are givers, carers, and empaths, a guide to focusing that energy on yourself, even if that feels frightening.
Mm.
Many of us, Jeffrey Marsh was conditioned to have outward focus, to give to others, to be a good listener, and to be the one who gave the best advice. And in Marsh's case, it was a method of survival. Growing up in gender fluid and in an unaccepting family, Marsh did everything they could to meet the needs of others and not have needs of their own. And ultimately, this meant Marsh putting themselves in the back seat of their own life. Whether you're a survivor of abuse and trauma like Marsh, or you've passively accepted that your own worth ought to be defined by your usefulness to others, Take Your Own Advice will give you the confidence to lead your life on your own terms and prioritize what's important to you. It's time that you learn to put yourself first, to take care of yourself, and to ask others to listen to you for a change. You do give the best advice, after all. So, Jeffrey, again, welcome back to The View. Please tell us more.
Please tell us
Please.
everything.
All
Everything.
the things.
We need to start with a compliment. It's my pleasure to talk to you for a couple of reasons, because you're doing the work and you're not trying to, oh, I don't know, present some sort of perfect image. You, in your work every single day, show the process. And I think that's incredibly vital for everybody to know they're not alone. Some influencers, guru types, teachers, whatever, try to have this like, I've done it all, I've seen it all kind of,
Listen to me
mountaintop.
because I'm perfect. Yes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that I think is the wrong direction. We're all in this together and we're all on a path together. So that's number one to compliment you. But number two to compliment you, you're undoing some of the stuff you just mentioned. So some of the stuff I grew up with, you're being that different parent already. You're being that different way of approaching your own children already. And I'm sure there are days when you feel like you might have messed up a little bit or something along those lines. But if you just take a look at the largest picture, you are doing something that's vitally important in both your own life and your child's life. And it can't be overstated how important that is.
Thank you for both of those. And I want to say how very different it is to be on the receiving end of your compliment now versus like a year and a half ago when you gave me a compliment when we started coaching and I immediately deflected and you immediately were like, wow, I'm calling this out. And I'm like, yeah, no, I am doing the work and I am a good parent and I am showing my authentic real self. Those are certainly things that are true of me. So thank you.
Yes. I think most people think that if they accept a compliment, they'll get full of themselves and they'll become a huge jerk and they'll spew out trauma on everyone else, right? By being this complete a hole of a person just because they said, yes, I'm doing good work. Isn't it nice to get over that?
It
Almost
is.
the opposite happens because you become a more giving person because then other people can admit when they've done good things too.
That's exactly what I was going to say, which is that I think it would have been a lot harder for me to get there if I didn't have children, especially who are teenagers, and I can see myself and my behavior, my husband's behavior reflected in them. And I think it was so much easier to work on myself and to model what I wanted them to grow into. I think, we'll talk a lot about your work and all the things, but I think for me, how I got here was being able to say, like, in order to be the best parent for my kids, I need to be selfish. I need to make some choices for myself. And I think, like
Mhm.
you said, that's very difficult to do, whether it's taking a compliment and like truly owning it, or whether it's doing something in your own best interest and not in other people's best interest. I had to get there by saying, I'm making a selfish choice, but really it's for my kids because if I get more sleep, if I rest, if I do the things that refill my own cup, then it will help my kids because I'll be a better version of myself. I won't be so quick tempered. I'll have, blah, blah, blah. And I think that was progression, right? Like, obviously, I kept doing the work and then I got out of doing it for someone else and doing it for myself. But I think however someone needs to get there, it is truly life-changing, and I am genuine in crediting you to really, like, opening that door for me. I can't say, like, you personally changed my life because I did the work,
Yes,
and
we
I think that message was probably something that I heard previously in my life, and I was not in a place to hear it. But the way that you practice with such compassion and kindness, it is what I needed to hear when I was ready to hear it in a way that truly has transformed my whole family, and I know many other people. So I'm excited that you're sharing even more of yourself in this in that.
Yes, and that's the point of take your own advice. When are you ready to accept the wisdom you already know? So many people find themselves in a position, or people kept repeating to me in coaching sessions, workshops, everywhere. I know what to do, I just can't do it. That is an interesting place, right? I know I should leave this job. I know I should have such and such discussion with my partner. I know I should do this. I know I should do that. I just can't do it. How do we begin to accept that and trust that wisdom that we have inside ourselves? The first book, How to Be You, was about getting to know that you're not such a bad person. How to be you, right? You accept the way you are is a good place to start, right? And take your own advice is the next step because people are in a spot, the world is in a spot where we need to step forward and we need to do the good work because, how should I put this delicately? Humanity needs us to do that work.
Yeah. I It is a weird time for many right now, and it's I can't even find the words because 'cause I'm often just like, "What is happening?" Which, for if you're not listening to this when it comes out, it is Pride Month 2023, and I don't know, I just use the analogy the world's on fire, but I don't think that fully encompasses the ache that we all feel. I think it's like collective mourning, collective grief, and all the
Mhm.
other things that we're going through. So I know for me personally, it felt like you were reading my mind to talk about specifically having needs met. That's a phrase that I've been opened to over the last couple of years and has really allowed me to vocalize something in a way that kind of detached that selfish feeling or detached that I shouldn't ask this of someone because it's a selfish ask. If I used the phrase having my needs met or, my child's needs aren't being met and they need blah, 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 it kind of opened that door for me. And I love that that's a concept you lean into both for self and for others. Can you share more about
I sure can. The first thing I think about is all the people who hate my guts.
their lives are miserable, but they're also making your life miserable if you hadn't already done so much work to
Yeah,
be
I mean, they're
compassionate.
trying
Yeah.
to make my life miserable for sure. I'm an out, open LGBTQ person. And again, it's Pride 2023. Perhaps the weirdest pride of my life, or certainly one of the most emotional prides of my life. And there are lots of people who don't want LGBTQ creators or out LGBTQ folks to exist or survive or thrive right now. And I assume that those folks are hating me or hating us to meet an unmet need. That's just what makes the most sense to me. And tragically, I actually do have a lot of empathy for it. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. They have to do the same stuff that you and I are doing in order to meet that need. So, no matter how enthusiastically or how much or how many death threats, how many bomb threats, they throw my way, it's not going to meet that need for them. And that ultimately to me is a human tragedy.
I think I could expand on that so that people who might not be where we are fully understand what that means. Because
Mm,
I remember when I first came to your work, I was shocked at the empathy that you can have for someone who treats you so horribly and feeling like you must not be healthy if you're not angry someone's doing that to you. And I genuinely am, on a very different place now, but for someone who's feeling that way, like, how could you not be mad that someone's giving you death threats? How could you not, you know, have anger? And I'm guessing that you have fear, you probably have anxiety around safety and different kinds of things like that. You're nodding your head for people who are listening.
yes, I'll give it a verbal yes.
Yes. And your anger is something different. Your anger goes to, where is the person coming from? What kind of person has to be so miserable in their own life that they spend time trying to make someone else unhappy? That the life that they're living is missing some element, some component that fills their bucket in some sort of way, that their needs aren't being met, emotionally fulfilled, and they're grasping for it in other ways. That they see somebody else feeling happy and they resent it because they don't feel happiness and they feel like that person doesn't deserve it because I don't have it. And I think that is so sad and tragic And yet at the same time, most people aren't ready to do that work. Like, you can't have the conversation, though you have shared direct messages and different things that you've had with people that have enabled them to open up. And what a fantastic human you are to be open to that and to spend the time. But I think for me, that became something that really opened my eyes to how divisive the country has become. That when we aren't compassionate, when we don't have an understanding of someone's lived experience or the needs that are not being met from all around the world, from all walks of life, because everybody has some experience that was not ideal in some way or another. We all have our own, past, whatever that looks like or why it looks like. And the difference that it makes in our lives is being able to understand, that person is behaving that way because they don't have the skills to understand what their own needs are, and they're leveraging it on someone else in a way that is unhealthy because that's the coping skill that they learned versus expressing their needs and saying, you know, I feel X, Y, and Z, and this is what I need from someone. And I think that I wanted to kind of like drill into that a little bit because it would be really hard for me to have heard that like 2 or 3 years ago and not I would not have understood what you meant by someone who's cruel to me means their needs aren't being like, I would have been like, what do those 2 things have to do with each other?
First step in general, somebody who's happy, content, loving their life is not mean to me. That's my first bit of
Or
evidence that I
anybody.
have, right?
Yes,
Or
right.
other people,
No
right?
no happy person, I think it was Brené Brown, I don't remember. No happy person tries to make someone else unhappy or belittles anybody else, right? Like, that is
Right,
not yes, yeah.
right. And I tend to look at it in terms of needs and whether they're being met because the path to true authentic happiness seems to be through learning to meet your own needs. And yes, we need community as well. It's lovely to have a husband, which I do. Right? It's not, we shouldn't, I don't think the hermit life is for, all human beings when it comes to happiness. And there's a lot we can give ourselves to help ourselves to be happy. So why not give ourselves every single thing we can? But you make me think of, to directly answer your question, I don't know what's going on in someone's heart. I actually cannot comprehend pure evil. Can't comprehend what was going on for, all the authoritarians and dictators throughout history. I don't know I just can't get my mind around or my heart around it. It brings me great peace, love, kindness in my life selfishly. If the narrative I have going on inside my mind is that person's in a lot of pain. And I'm not, to be ultra clear, I'm not talking about dictators throughout history. I'm talking about, the person who goes on YouTube and makes an obsessive several hour long video about me being a horrible person. They must be in a lot of pain. And just that bit of empathy helps me to sleep at night and continue to do my mission, which is the most important thing for me. You also mentioned anger. Can I say something about anger?
Of course, please.
That's a whole section of Take Your Own Advice because I realized that my anger always had roots in injustice, unfairness. So it would be a narrative I was telling myself, like somebody else has something that I want, and that makes me angry. But also, I would get angry about injustice in the world. And, to me, that is a very righteous approach. And anger in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. And there's a way to directly meet your needs so that you can more effectively work out the injustice in the world, pull out the injustice in the stamp out the injustice in the world, get rid of the injustice in the world with a kind, loving, happy heart. And it actually works out better that way, in my experience.
It reminds me, and not the anger part, but the overall message, a lot
Mm,
of the story, The Giving Tree. I'm assuming that you've read the story,
Am I
right?
gonna cut my limbs off and be
Yes.
a stump?
Yes.
And
So
that's what you're supposed to be for everybody.
exactly.
Yeah.
So many people read that book and think positively about it. I
Right.
remember thinking, as I was reading it to my kids, I didn't remember it as a child, but I was reading it to my very young children halfway through. Like, I'm already committed to reading this book, and I'm like, "This is awful. This poor tree just kept giving and giving and
Mhm.
giving of itself and not being appreciated, not restoring itself, and ended up dying for somebody else's pleasure." And then that person kind of cut off their nose to spite their face. That tree wasn't there later for them anymore because they used it too much. And I would always read the story to my kids with little additions like, do you think it was fair of the boy to ask for the tree to give more than he was already giving? Because it just broke my heart. Yet that is how I treated myself for so long, right? When I reflected back, I'm like, wow, am I really upset with this story? Because I'm realizing that it is speaking to me on a deeper, more problematic level about
Mhm.
how I'm acting in my own life. I'm wondering how much we all identify with that story. You're saying, yep, cutting off your limbs. Like, I think that kind of sparked it for me, like this message that you're talking about. Like, that's the analogy.
Yeah, the whole point of take your own advice is to help people not just take their advice, right? You would never tell a friend, "Oh, give and give until you die." That's the point of life. You're a
Yeah,
bad person if you
that'll
don't,
be great.
right? We know how to tell a friend, "Take care of yourself." Are we able to do it ourselves? How do we make that transition? And as you pointed out, to me, it's perfectly appropriate to pull every lever and try every trick in the book to get closer to truly loving yourself. And, not like that's an end point. That'll be for the rest of our lives. But a trick like, I'm taking a nap so that I can be rested when I give to everyone else later today, right? Whatever you need to do to be able to initiate those first self care habits, go for it. And eventually we realize that we want to have healthy branches, leaves, thriving, and help other people to do that, but not at the expense of us.
Why do you think so many of us, those who are deeply, as you say, givers, a giving tree, empaths, however someone identifies, why do you think we don't prioritize taking care of ourselves?
Ooh, I know. It's because I'll speak for myself and maybe it'll resonate for people. I was programmed into it. I was told in many ways, which are detailed in the book or we can talk about, that I wasn't really worth much. And the only value I had was in quite literally being the emotional support child, the family therapist, proper upper person. And that was my can I tell you about an extra wrinkle in it? So all of my family were cis people. And so and most of the people in the world are cis people. And I've desperately had to navigate it as a non binary person, as an LGBTQ, the dynamic of sacrificing everything about myself specifically for the quote unquote dominant culture, the cis people, the non trans people, the non people. But I would bet that resonates for almost everybody anyway. That we were told somewhere along the line that our value was in helping other people have realizations, get to the next level spiritually, feel better about themselves, be comforted, be soothed, on, and never quite seeing until probably we're adults. That's a huge sacrifice on our part.
And I think it ties into the perfectionism piece for me as it relates to ableism. Like, this was another kind of
Mhm.
like putting all the pieces of the puzzle together for myself. I had Imani Barbarin on the show, who was incredible. And I was attending a conference and her speak, and it was
Mm.
like a light bulb went off in my head because she talked about, like, who are you doing all the things for? Like, really, who are you doing all the things for? And ultimately, I realized I was doing all those things because I wanted to be seen to I wanted to be perceived as capable. I wanted to be perceived as valued, as you said. I also wanted to ensure that I was not perceived as lazy because I didn't want to be perceived as fat because people always think fat and lazy go together. And so I'm like, if
Mhm.
I do all the things, I'll show the people the value that I have. I'll be perfect and they can't not love me then. Like we talked about from your first book, you were like, I'll do all the religious things so that I can show people,
Yes.
that I am not who they think I am. And in my mind, it was very similar for me, but on a journey of my body being perceived a certain
Yep.
way. And so when I started putting all the pieces together, I'm like, oh, I get it. I'm doing all the things for everybody else so that they don't ever stop to think the reason Stacy's not doing that is because she's fat and lazy. And then I was like, what difference does it make in my life if that's what someone else thinks? None. But it makes a huge difference in my life if I'm never resting and I'm never enjoying my own life. I'm never living it for me. I'm only worried about what somebody else is thinking because as the very cliche saying goes, you can be the juiciest peach in the orchard, someone's still not going to like peaches. And it didn't matter how hard I tried to be perfect and whatever, like there's still going to be people who are just not going to love what I'm doing. And so why was I continuing to try?
Yeah, and if you could flip a switch and have whatever that voice in your head says is the perfect body, you probably still would not be off the hook. You wouldn't be able to rest. You'd have
Oh
to,
yeah, I'd find something else to, yeah, for sure.
because it's a process. And that is, I love Imani so much. It's to me a form of activism to rest.
I like it.
It's a form of resistance to rest, especially in, this world we live in and the society we have currently constituted. So, and that is a very, that is also to me, I don't know if you meant to imply this, but I wanted to say it outright. That's a very little kid place. If we're a kid, it literally feels like life and death, or at least to me it did, right? I have got to do these things or I will be abandoned. I won't have food. I'll be in the gutter. I'll be dead, right? And so it feels like this life and death struggle to keep going, to prove, to make the grade. And the words you say that are going to ring in my mind forever, quote, I want to be perceived as ellipses, end quote. So may I ask you a question? May I turn the tables
Yeah.
on you? Can you talk about the difference between I want to be perceived as not lazy or I want to be perceived as capable? What's the difference between that and living your life being capable?
So I'll try to put myself back in that mindset because these
You're
days
so far away from it.
I would literally say, I don't know because I don't really care anymore. Like I know that
Right.
I am capable. And if someone doesn't see that on their own or doesn't find value in me, that's not my journey. That's a them problem, which I could not have said a couple of years ago. I think what I thought then was that I truly was lacking self worth to understand that I was capable or believe it in myself, and that my sense of self was dependent on the validation of others, that I
Mhm.
needed someone else to think that I was capable in order to believe it to be true of myself. Versus today, I genuinely know that I'm capable. Like, I applied to Harvard Business School on my own. I was like, I'm going to do this. And I'm really excited about it. And I got in and I was like, yes. And it wasn't shocking for me. And I wasn't like, because I knew that I was capable. And if I didn't get in, then I'll find the next thing. But like, that was a very different experience for me than a couple of years ago, I would have felt like.
Yes, and that's what I was pointing to. So thank you for taking it there. This is I want to be perceived as capable has a lot to do with other people, but it also puts capable on a continuum with incapable. And so now we have all this machination inside our brains with where am I on the continuum, and do they think I'm over here? And if I do this, will they think I'm closer to capable? And I'm gonna, it's just this whole matrix of things you have to maintain. Whereas knowing deep in your heart, I'm capable, the way you phrase that, to me, it almost, and I don't know if this is your experience, please tell me, it's like capable not on a continuum. There's no like opposite end of incapable. It is a capable in a space of no matter what happens,
Yeah,
I
I would
deserve to be
agree with
here.
that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would agree with that. I would say that rather than incapable, I would describe it as I would be lacking those skills, or I would be lacking that experience, or I would things that I could try to obtain or try not to based on my own choice. Not that I'm incapable. Like it's no longer out of my hands. It's now in my hands and a choice that I'm making.
Yeah, maybe the word capable is a little tricky as because it's been used against all of us so many times. But if we sub in something like worthy, there's no question that there is a worthiness to every human being that's not on a continuum with unworthy. Not like they could do something to be pulled back into unworthy as a human soul, as a human being. And that reminds me of earlier on in our conversation. There was something I wanted to clarify. I set boundaries left and right. I will block people. I have someone who runs my social media and they do things, to keep people accountable and to do our best. Sometimes, the internet's a deluge, but we do set boundaries. In other words, another trap for people is I have a loving, kind, empathetic view toward my haters, so they get to do whatever they want. No, not true.
It's because someone is unhappy in their own life doesn't mean that they get to try to make you unhappy. Like I really love this is such an aside. Casey Musgrave's song about this, and she says, "Pissing in someone else's yard doesn't make yours greener." There's like a whole song of different analogies and stuff, but I use that
Mhm.
sentence all the time with my kids because if you want to focus on your lawn and you're creating boundaries and you put up a fence in your yard and someone else walks through your fence to defecate or use the bathroom or whatever in your yard, you still get to say no. Like if you want to be unhappy that my yard looks great and your yard doesn't, you still have to stand on the other side of the fence and do that. I think
Yes,
that's a great analogy for like a physical boundary when I try to explain it to my kids, like what a boundary is and how you're not being mean. You just can't come into my yard and do what you want. It's my yard.
exactly so. And to me, it hopefully helps someone take another step toward getting their needs met themselves and being a happy person. I just want everybody to be stepping closer to. And, along those lines, with that theme, I realized that if part of my mission or my talent or how do we want to phrase it religiously? If I were a Christian, I would say, part of what God has given me, tasked me to do, is to draw out in people that which needs to be healed. And I tell you, for some human beings, that is incredibly ugly stuff that comes out and comes up. But if that's my lot in life, then I might as well get on with it. Do you know?
I'm happy to be on the other side of that coin for you. This
We can
is
do
your
that for
lot.
each other. That's
This
our
is your lot
talent.
in life. And that journey then pays it forward to stopping generational trauma of some of this stuff and teaching good habits and hopefully creating a future generation of people who can stop and ask, how can I help you in this moment? Or as my 16-year-old asked me earlier today, what do you need in this moment? Like I was rubbing my face and I was like heavily sighing and I was clearly like processing all the things that I needed to do. And they were here and I was trying to work and I wasn't communicating. I need space. And they could sense it. And they have been modeled this behavior at this point that they asked me how they could help meet my needs in that moment because they could sense that
Mm,
they weren't being met. And I was like, it's moments like that where I'm just like, wow. what a difference like this kind of act of parenting makes versus that child thinking it had something to do with them and then getting defensive and then like all of the things that go along with that. And it is so much work. It really is work to unpack your stuff to be able to say, "Oh, okay," and to start taking the steps. But it is incredible. And while you are unpacking some stuff for people who get kind of ugly when you throw their stuff on the front lawn, their suitcases unpacked. There are those of us who are like, "Oh, I didn't know I was carrying that around in my bag. Let me repack the suitcase a little bit." So, what
Yeah.
else could readers expect to find in Take Your Own Advice? You talked a little bit about anger and needs being met. What else?
This transition that I see a lot of people in, going from wishing that other people would give them a place to belong to just going ahead and creating the spaces they've always wanted with other people, with themselves, taking the turning the corner from I wish everybody else would do it and help me, and that would make me worthy and I want to be perceived as, worthy enough for that from someone else. And just making that transition to, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and here we go. We're doing it. And if you want to join me, you can join me, but I'm going to be in the spot where I want. That to me is a really powerful thing to write about and to see other people doing. Can I tell
And
you a fun part of the book?
you ask these questions, can I want you to know you don't get
May
to
I?
ask. You have full reign to bring it on.
I do this convention, which, anybody who's been in therapy or coaching or whatever has probably done the exercise themselves. But I complement the memoiry bits with kind letters to myself at those ages. So I'll tell a story about me being 13, me being 18, and then write a letter to my 13-year-old self, to my 18-year-old self. And that kind of going back, and it's not even going back because those parts of ourselves are here with us in the present. But that kind of showing myself the care, I had someone say to me the other day, I just wanted someone to see the real me. That's what I always wanted. And to give that to yourself is a really powerful thing to do.
Do you think that there is something to the self-awareness aspect of being able to see yourself, right? Like when you say someone said, "I really wanted to see the true me," part of that
They
is
said, I want someone else to see. I
yes.
always wanted someone else to see the true me, like a parent
Okay.
or a romantic partner.
Yeah. I think for a lot of us, I know for myself at least, part of that was building up a wall so tall and so thick to protect myself from being vulnerable to the judgment or the perception of something I didn't want to be perceived as, or whatever the case may be, and to protect myself from being continuously hurt, that I didn't even know who I was. I lacked the self awareness to know who I truly was. And my perception of who I was different than everybody else's perception, which meant there was a disconnect with what I
Mm.
was feeling and who I was, and then who I was behaving like to others. And I wonder, is there a particular phrase or moment? I mean, obviously, reading the books, doing the coaching, doing the work, all these things are necessary to truly unravel that. But I would imagine that a lot of people just have a really hard time with that kind of first step, like taking the leap to take down one brick from the wall and peer through, be like, it's
The
out
little
there. And are they
eyes
gonna,
in there
yeah, are they
sticking
gonna
up.
punch me through the hole
Yeah.
in the wall, you know?
Yeah. That's what it feels like. Yeah. So what is, a helpful tidbit? What
I guess, yeah. I mean, is there something that you found enables people to be willing to kind of take that first step that they say to you, "I know what I need to do, but I can't. I won't." What is the thing that allows that to start?
I'm going to tell people a secret. Don't share it, anybody who's listening. Many times I have assigned coaching clients to watch Netflix and snack because that assignment makes people's skin crawl. I should be very clear. The assignment is to do that without hating yourself. So it's fine to sit on the couch and watch Netflix if you're guilty, if you feel bad, if you know you should be doing X, but you're sitting here instead. Right? All of that is fine. But ask somebody to just love it, to just watch Netflix and enjoy it and rest and have a snack. And, it's like one of the hardest things to do. And as I was pondering the answer to your question, I'm not sure. I just happen to have this face or orientation to life, or because I've done the work or whatever it is, that people just take those bricks out and want to, talk to me through the bricks. And
You are a safe space. I think that also, like, allows.
yeah, that's a really amazing point because I'm a safe space for myself first and most. And I think people can get a sense of that and can get a sense that the teacup of safe space spilleth over with me and they can have as much as they want or need.
But not too much because you will keep your boundaries.
Well,
They can't empty your cup, you need some.
that is true. And I have quite a lot. So I'm willing
Yes.
to share.
I am wondering what's next for you?
There is probably a workbook coming for the second book
We're
that
getting
more
all the secrets, I'm so excited.
more directly, don't tell Penguin I told you, that more directly walks people through a lot of the concepts in the book. And I can't tell you what the secret is, but television is in the future. So we'll watch out for that. And I said I guess no, it was a video I made. In regard to trans rights, we see expansion and contraction in regard to LGBTQ rights in general. And we're in a contraction. School boards, governors, lots of people, regular folks, TikTokers, hate our guts right now and are coming after us and want us to be frank. And when things expand again, like they have, when we make inroads, when there's more representation, when society gets a little softer around us, and when that expansion happens again, you'll find me doing the same videos, the same work, the same mission. That to me was a bit of a personal breakthrough that I had, that my mission doesn't change no matter what happens.
I think that expansion and contraction is a really good kind of phrase for what's happening,
Mm,
and I have been describing it as a rubber band, and I haven't actually talked about it here on the podcast. But when we look at revolutions, because I truly believe that we are in a revolution right now. No one ever knows that they're currently in a revolution when it's happening. You can only see it when you look back, and progress has significantly been made. And we saw that progress was significantly being made years ago. We had a Black president, we had more human rights than we've ever had in this country. And the rubber band, if we think about it, started to pull. People felt uncomfortable with change, which is very common and part of why revolutions happen, because people are saying, no, we can't do that. That's not traditional. That's not what was intended, or whatever the phrase might be. And so that rubber band just pulls back and back as far as it can go to kind of keep a status quo, to try to prevent the change from happening. But we know from thousands of years in human history that you can't prevent change from happening ever. It is, if there's one thing that is certain, it's not taxes, it's change. Change will happen. And so eventually that rubber band's going to snap. It can only go back for so long, for so far. And the hope I tell my children is that when it pushes forward, that, those people who have been fighting this fight and, standing up for the health and well-being of everyone. This is a health and wellness show, and I want to remind people we cannot talk about health and wellness of ourselves without talking about the safety and the health and wellness of everyone. Like, I don't want to be part of a community that is only selfish in how we approach wellness. And so for me, I think about protecting the people like you who are doing the activism and who are standing up to people who are threatening your life to ensure that you are there to celebrate the jumping forward of the rubber band. Like, I wanna physically envision you in that rubber band, busting forward into the future and, confetti cannon coming out because, I tell my kids, I'm like, I think of, the generation that they are and what their beliefs are and how strongly they believe in things like climate change, not just human rights, right? Like, they have a deep belief in the betterment of our entire community and all things that affect it. And when they can vote, I think is really when I say we might have a couple more bad
It's over.
years. We might have a couple more
Yeah.
bad years, but, like, I truly believe that, and that's the only thing that can get me through, right? Like, otherwise, I'm like, The Handmaid's Tale is an autobiography, you know?
I just hope as that rubber band is stretching backward, we don't, lose our democracy for a while.
Yes.
Let's just keep our fingers crossed on that one. But I happen to agree with you. It's an optimistic view, but I generally am an optimistic kind of person. I think that it's a perfect analogy because the rubber band is pulling back because the other side is pulling forward. They wouldn't have to tug on their side. They wouldn't have to be upset, angry, etc. They wouldn't have to fight so hard if we weren't powerful. And so keeping that in mind is a beautiful thing as well. And not for nothing, you already see what we could call the backlash to the backlash, right? People are going into school board meetings.
Mhm.
People are going into spaces to, I want to say fight, but then I also want to say, they're doing, a lot of people are doing a non-violent version. So
Advocate. Yeah.
fight doesn't exactly fit, but it's advocate and give a darn about our society and other human beings.
Yeah.
And can
Because
I,
the squeaky wheel gets the grease, then the people who are happy with where we were going, we weren't squeaky because we were happy. Now we have to be squeaky, right?
mm, and so many people, so many allies say to me, I'm afraid to say the wrong thing. And I just want to encourage anyone listening who's non LGBTQ, that period is over. The period where you are afraid to say the wrong thing, so you don't say anything, you don't speak up, we're finished. Number one, go ahead and say the wrong thing. We'll just learn together and we'll, we'll tell you what the better thing to say it. But also, there are a ton of things you can speak about that you know about already. You don't have to know the difference between gender queer and gender fluid in order to speak about human dignity, respect, kindness, treating other people with love, even if you may not quote unquote get. Those are things anybody can speak about, and I would encourage people to do so.
I literally just clapping, dropping mic. Yes, thank you. Okay, so I always like to leave listeners with some positive, actionable steps. I love that you brought up, being an ally, being willing to potentially say the wrong thing, make yourself a little bit vulnerable on behalf of others who need you to advocate for them. I would say that's one of the things that people can walk away and start to do as it relates to pausing the giving tree behavior and starting to implement some of the concepts in take your own advice for themselves. What are some of your kind of actionable suggestions? Go watch Netflix and don't feel guilty. Mine would be literally take a nap, build in a siesta, pretend you live in Spain and
Sure.
build in a siesta for yourself because I quit caffeine and that was the best thing that I ever did for myself. And I couldn't have done it without naps. So, what are some of your kind of actionable steps to start caring for yourself and not becoming the giving tree?
Now nobody's going to want to coach with me because I'm going to tell them to watch Netflix
No.
and not hate it, not feel a little guilty behind the scenes, right? The reason that Netflix thing is so handy, and this is really the most practical tip I can offer, People tend to concentrate on the what's when they ought to concentrate on the hows, or there shouldn't really be an S on it's not what, it's how. Meaning, we want to get the self care checklist in order. I did this. I did that over here. I accomplished this. I want to be perceived as, right? I want to be perceived as good at self care or whatever it is. And the idea is, it actually, I wouldn't recommend you hurt anybody, obviously, but it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's how are you being with yourself? How are you treating yourself? So start also, which is also partly what the book is about, make that transition away from a checklist, a to do list. You can still have one, but put somewhere on your to do list, do all of my to dos with kindness for myself. And if there's something that you can't quite do that with yet, take it off the list.
I love it.
I
Okay.
love it too.
Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you'd like to share?
I only do two things. I help people hate themselves less, and I forward LGBTQ acceptance any way that I can. So I think thank you is in order. I couldn't do those two pillars of my existence without you and being able to come and chat with you today and be in the safe space that you provided today. So
Well,
thank
thank you for sharing of yourself and trusting me in this space. I always love talking with you. And I want to remind listeners that if you would like to have more of Jeffrey in your life, why wouldn't you, first of all, go to jeffreymarsh.com where they have coaching. I am genuine and sincere when I say I had no connection to you. There was nothing. And we had our coaching session and it was incredible for me. So listeners, if you're feeling moved by some of the things that we talked about, or if you identify with some of the difficulties in, these concepts, Jeffrey's books are fantastic. Take Your Own Advice, as well as How to Be You. And they offer coaching at jeffreymarsh.com. You can also follow Jeffrey on Instagram and TikTok at the Jeffrey Marsh. Even just like seeing your face pop up in my feed and
you.
having like a positive message come through is often a really great reminder. I find myself like unclenching my jaw or relaxing my shoulders and just being like taking a deep breath, like, yes, okay, if Jeffrey can do this and Jeffrey can be calm, I can do this too. So, listeners, hopefully you can enjoy some of that connection as well.
Everybody's welcome. And, if anybody, we mentioned I get a lot of death threats. So I don't check the email as the first person to check it, right? It gets filtered to me, but it'll get to me. Hello at jeffreymarsh.com. If you want to tell me something, me, connecting and my work, please. I strive to be very accessible. So,
Sharing the positive vibes.
yeah,
And listeners, if you love the show that we create and produce ourselves, the Patreon is a great way to support the show. So is leaving a review and hitting the follow or subscribe button in whatever podcast app that you're using so that others can find us as well. And we've put a list of the shows that I referenced before, both with Jeffrey, they've been on twice before, as well as with Amani Barbarin. I
mhm,
consistently get that wrong. And the show notes on realeverything.com. Thank you for tuning in today. We appreciate your willingness to be open to growth through your own personal changes because no one is perfect, but in listening, learning, and unlearning, we can become better versions of ourselves. Jeffrey, you always help us do that. Thank you so much for being on the show
thank
today.
you.